Welcome to the Dental Implant Practices podcast, where each episode will explore how to integrate dental implants into your practice and into bone, with your host, Dr. Philip Gordon.
Welcome back to another episode of the Dental Implant Practices podcast. It is my pleasure today to introduce Weston, the CEO of Dental Intel. I am a current user of Dental Intel and love the information and data that it provides, and it is a great pleasure for me to have Weston on the show. So Weston, I'll have you do a brief introduction of yourself and a little bit on your background and how you got started, how you started this company.
Yeah, awesome. Well, thanks for having me, Phil. I'm excited to have this conversation with you today, and hopefully we can provide your listeners with some valuable information that they can apply and somehow figure out ways to continue to improve in this journey of dentistry. So just as a brief background on me, I actually started a CPA firm and partnered with one of my colleagues in 2004. And when we started that firm, we had a mission to be a little bit different from most CPA firms, and the fact that we really wanted to provide proactive advice and not just what typical accountants do, which is just basically reconciling what happened in the past. We wanted to look more at the future. And we focused in the medical and into dental arena. I fell in love with the dental arena probably because I had a lot of close friends as going through school that ended up going into dental school and started opening practices. And it just ended up going that direction. I sold that firm in 2014. My partner still is there, but I sold my share of it to one of our senior tax managers over there. And that's when I started really focusing on Dental Intel and the business analytics side of things. As I didn't, in the accounting firm, I didn't really focus in the tax and accounting, but I was over all of we called it CFO consulting. And what we did there, Phil, was focused on just the profitability and the financial statements and the budgets of both the dental practice and also of the doctor's personal life. We didn't get into any investment strategies, but we really wanted to make sure that these doctors had a good solid budget and were reaching just around 50% overhead so that they had 50% profitability. And we were very successful in that. But it was interesting, 2012, I had a few of my friends at that time tell me that they were going to sell their dental practices. And I had been doing their work for a while, and I could tell that they weren't ready to. It's not like they were ready to retire by any means. So we got into the conversations of why would you do this? And they were stressed, not making the type of money that they had hoped or thought that they would be making as they graduated dental school. But yet at the same time, I had very similar practices, even in similar locations, some of them even 5 miles down the road, that the demographics of the practice was almost identical and they were flourishing. So that bothered me. And I started to look a lot deeper into that and wanted to know what the causation of that would be, because most of the metrics that we always focused on at that time were lagging. They were more financial statement metrics. And as we started diving into it, I actually ended up really getting into it and started hiring some business analysts. We brought on some analysts from Goldman Sachs, also some from Deloitte, and some from PricewaterhouseCoopers, some of the big four firms that were doing analytics there. Brought them on. I had them start organizing and gathering data from practice management softwares by calling the offices and getting reports. And it was arduous. It took forever. And we did it, though, and we did it for about 2 years until I finally decided I needed to start automating this and building out Dental Intel, which is what you're using today. Now you have a full automated version where there's no manual process at all. And that's kind of what took us here. And I've learned something in doing this. We can look at, well, let me ask you this. Before Dental Intel, Phil, in your practice, what would you measure? What would you look at on a regular basis? And you're not going to be any different than most dentists out there. So we ask this question all the time, and we get typically the same answers. But what are some of the common metrics that you would look at, or data or reports that you would look at?
These will probably be terrible, but
no, it's all right.
Probably truthful. So we would do production, and we would do that on a daily and monthly keep track of the day's production and then the month's production, right?
Right.
Where we're at on that. Look at collections, where we're at on the collections on that, and then, new patients. Those are obviously the big three.
Yeah, let's stop right there for a second. So funny. I'm not surprised, but every single time we ask that question, those are the top three that are always mentioned. I was actually lecturing in Oregon not too long ago, and we had about 60 dentists in the lecture. And as I was talking, I asked that question to the audience. I said, just start shouting it out. And sure enough, everyone kept yelling these numbers, and then it was quiet. And then someone else yelled out another number, and they were saying case acceptance percentage. And I was actually really impressed with that because that's a difficult thing to measure. But everyone yelled production, collections, and new patients. It's what everyone looks at. And that's what some of my friends would focus on too, that were selling their practices that were struggling. And I started asking a follow-up question to that. Let's say that your collections was down 20% from where you really wanted it to be, or to put that in dollars, let's say it was down $30,000 from where you wanted it to be for a month. And I would ask people, if you're that low, you expected to collect, why? Why were you low? And it's just crickets after that. Or if you didn't hit your production goal, why? I actually had a doctor that I was talking to just a couple of weeks ago in East. He's actually out of Boston. And when I was on the phone with him, he said, Weston, I had my best production month ever. We've never been this high. And when I looked at the dashboard, he literally was 40% higher than he'd ever been in any other month. That's a pretty big jump for a production. And I asked him a question. I said, doctor, this is awesome. Why? What'd you do? And then it was just silent. He's like, well, I don't know, but it's awesome. It's great. I did really good. And I said, well, that's great. But if we look at the dashboard and we identify the why behind it, now you can replicate it. Without knowing the whys behind why you're doing good or the whys on why you fell short of a goal, then we can't stop it or replicate it, whatever we're wanting to do with that action. And so that's really the intention and purpose of a dashboard, to really look at that. And everyone's looking at production, collections, and new patients. But the problem with those three metrics is they're very lagging in nature, meaning there's things that lead up to a solid production day. There's things that lead up to a solid collection day. And if one of those items that are leading to production are missing, then we're going to have a low production day. And so what's really important is that we're focusing on the metrics that are leading up to production. And maybe if we have some time today, that could kind of be a focal point of what we talk about, or what are the metrics that your dentists that are listening to this podcast today can go look at and start measuring that are leading indicators to how your production is going to be, so that if one of them is falling short, you can fix it before the day of production, so that we don't walk away thinking, oh, that wasn't such a great day. We can control that before that day even happens. And that's the purpose of a performance dashboard, right? That's what we hope. We want to be able to control the outcome of what's going on in our practice.
Yeah, we're just looking for more consistency, understanding why we got to where we're at and what we can do to either replicate that or increase it. And there's lots of little dashboards that you have, lots of little ways to measure things and little dials to turn in your practice. And you've got to know, was this month's production good because we had a lot of hygiene this month, and so we were able to increase visits, and that way we were able to increase diagnosis out of recare, and also we had new patients that were up, and case acceptance was up, and so it wasn't just we got the magic phone call. Yeah, it was. There's reasons that have happened behind the scenes there.
Right. So it's super critical to understand that. Now, when people hear numbers and we talk about dashboards and measuring and monitoring team performance, it can be scary. And I'll admit it's scary. There's some times where we would rather not know what our attrition percentage is, because we don't want to hear bad news, right? So a couple things around data too, and things that we focus really heavily on here at Dental Intel, is performance dashboards or any kind of reporting or monitoring of performance in a practice. It has to be used to identify things to celebrate, and then it has to be used to identify areas of opportunity. It should never be used as a weapon to say we're not doing this right, or you didn't do that right, or you didn't call this patient. If we're using it as that, it can really hurt the culture of a practice. And we always talk about making sure that we use our dashboard specifically, and any kind of dashboards in a practice or metrics or key performance indicators, whatever you want to call them, that we're using it to create a healthy data culture in the practice. And you can know whether you have a healthy data culture or not by two simple things. One, the team celebrates around the numbers together. Together, they recognize and celebrate success around these metrics. And two, if there's an area where we're not performing well, the team collaborates together, and they get together and they talk about possible solutions on what they might be able to do to improve those areas. Can I give you a quick example of a practice that you know Gary Takis?
Sure. Mm-hmm.
He does the Thriving Dentist show, right?
Yep.
And he's a coach. He owns a handful of practices as well, and is continuing to buy practices, and they're all successful. When we first started working with Gary Takis and his practices, we lit up a practice, and one of the first metrics that we showed him was his pre-appointment percentage, or that's one of the things that he noticed. He asked, "What is this? What is pre-appointment percentage?" And I said, "Well, what does it sound like?" And then he said, "Well, it sounds like the amount of my patients that are pre-appointed for their next visit." I said, "That's exactly what it is. What we're looking at is your active patients that you have. And we're then saying what percentage of those patients have a future appointment scheduled right now." So Gary Takis' pre-appointment percentage was sitting at 44%. And he said, "Weston, can this be right?" And I said, "Well, what do you mean, can it be right?" And he said, "Are you telling me that out of my 1,400 patients that I only have 44% of those scheduled?" And he said, "What is that? How many patients is that?" And I said, "It's around 600 of your patients. Out of 1,400 patients, you have around 600 of those scheduled for a future visit." He's like, "You've got to be kidding me." And I said, "No." And so here's the thing. This is what's so great about this. You could either use this as a weapon, right? To say, "Hey, hygienist or front desk team, why are you not rescheduling our hygiene patients and getting these guys scheduled back on the books?" Or you can use it just as a tool to discover with them. So this is what I love. And now Gary's been coaching for years. So he went to his team, and he's just simply in a morning huddle. Now in his morning huddle, you don't have a lot of time, right? I mean, you probably max 15 minutes. How much time do you spend on your morning huddles?
We do 15 minutes. Yeah.
15 minutes. And it goes fast because the focus is what? The patients that are coming in today, right? I mean, that's what you're focusing on. So there's not a lot of time. But in his morning huddle, he simply asked a question. He said, "Guys, could I just ask a simple question to the group?" And mainly to the hygienist. And they all obviously said yes. He said, out of the patients that come in and get cleaning or perio done today and exams, what percentage of those patients are we rescheduling? And guess what his office manager immediately piped up and said?
All of them.
Yeah, that's what she said. "We reschedule all of them, Gary, every single one of them when we get back on the books." And he says, "Okay, and who's doing the rescheduling?" And then they kind of walk through it, and the hygienists are doing the hygienists at the offices, and new patients that are coming in, they're making sure that the front desk team or the treatment coordinator is rescheduling the new patients that are coming in. And so they just said, "Oh, great. Well, can we look at something?" And he pulled up the dashboard, and he stopped it on the pre-appointment percentage. And he said, "If you guys look at this pre-appointment percentage, this is the percentage of our patients that are active in our practice right now that actually have a future appointment." And he just showed the metric. And he said the silence felt like an eternity, but it couldn't have been more than 5 seconds. But it felt long because it was just a long silence. And his office manager just looked at it, and she finally said, "Oh man, we really suck in this." And then everyone started laughing, right? So they kind of brought it. He didn't have to say that they suck at it. They saw the data, and they saw that they weren't doing well in it, and she brought it up. And it was in a non-threatening manner. It was just like, "Man, we're really not doing good at this." And so then Gary, knowing the dashboard, scrolled down to another metric, which is called hygiene reappointment percentage, which is just specifically looking at, out of the hygiene patients that are coming in today, what percentage of those patients left today with a future hygiene appointment? And when he looked at that, these guys were sitting down in the mid-60s. So 60% of these visits that were coming in were only rescheduling. And if you think about that, Philip, we have patients, if we had 100 hygiene patients come in and only 60 of those rescheduled and 40 of them were left unscheduled, and then the ones that did schedule, and we have some broken percentage, right? Not every patient shows up.
So as we lose some patients and they don't show up, eventually patients just start falling through the cracks. And so Gary just said to his hygiene team, guys, let's just focus on this today and this week. That's this one component of our practice. Let's just make sure that we're using the simple word. And all I said is, let's go ahead and get you scheduled for your next hygiene appointment. And every hygienist, I just want you to say that, and then just go to your schedule and say, okay, I have this day, and give them 2 options, and let's just get it scheduled. Well, this is what's really neat. The very next day, these guys were over 92% on their hygiene reappointment percentage. They went back with the office and showed them the metrics, and they were all clapping and they celebrated together. It was really a healthy environment around the data. And then today, where their pre-appointment percentage was sitting at 44%, right now, they've been actively involved in getting all their patients rescheduled. They're sitting at 80. I'm looking at his dashboard right now. He's sitting at 86% reappointment percentage. Huge improvements, right? But that's the kind of power that you can have by having good, timely, and accurate, reliable, dependent, and consistent metrics in front of you. Whether you're doing this on an Excel sheet, whether you have an automated system like Dental Intel, as long as you're constantly looking at it together as a team, this is when you can really see some incredible things happen in your practice.
Yeah, that's for sure. I mean, everybody knows, having the data to look at is important, but the problem is some people don't know what data to look at, and other people don't know where to get it within their practice management software system or how to track it. So
yeah, sometimes the data that you really need, you just can't get. So for example, hygiene reappointment percentage, let me give you some fun statistics real quick. And you guys can write this down, and I'm even happy to post something online, an Excel file showing this so that you can see this and practices can see this. But let's say that you're reappointing your patients at 70%, okay? When they come in, 70% of them are walking out with a future appointment. And that your practice on average is getting 20 new patients a month, okay? So a typical GP practice. You're reappointing at 70%, you're adding 20 new patients every single month. Here's what's crazy about this. If you increase your reappointment percentage from 70% to 85%, which is not that hard to do, that means out of 10 patients, 8.5 of them are going to reschedule. If we ask right, that'll happen. But if you just increase it by that 15% and don't change how many new patients you're having, in 3 years and 7 months, so not quite 4 years, but close to 4 years, your active patient base, your count of active patients will be twice as big had you left it at 70% reappointment. That's the type of impact that this can have. You've probably seen it. Have you seen the show Gladiator? One of my favorite shows of all time. There's a scene in there when he's sitting there on the horses and they're about ready to go to war, and he's talking to all of his men, and a line that he says in there, he says, "What we do today in life echoes in eternity." Do you remember that line?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it was a big one.
It's no different. It's no different with your hygienist. What they do today in reappointing your patients echoes the next 6, 12, and 18 months in your practice. And if they don't do it right, guess what's going to happen 6 months from now? You're going to struggle on keeping your operatories full. But if they do it right, you're going to be busting at the seams, and the thing that you're going to have to worry about is finding open chair time for new patients. And it happens over and over again in practices. So it's a lot of fun. Now, if you're like me, sometimes you look at a number and you're like, okay, I can see that that's not good, but then you have the question, what do I do about it, right? You don't know how to fix it. There are some times where you look at a number and you know exactly what you need to do. And it's okay to be in both situations. Here's what's great, though. 2 minds is better than 1. 3 is better than 1. 4 is better than 1. And in most practices, you have 7 to 10 minds that are sitting right there. So if you bring up a number in a huddle and you show, and you just simply explore that with the team around you, now you're creating this healthy culture. You're able to have a conversation and say, guys, we're not doing really good on our treatment acceptance percentage. We're sitting at 23%, and we should be getting at least 65%. What do you think we might be able to do? And you're going to start hearing some incredible results and information come from your team members. And now that they're focusing on it and talk about the solution together behind the data, You created this healthy environment to where everyone's working on improving that metric together as a team. And that's the power of using data the right way. You could do it a different way, and you could say, Susan, your treatment acceptance percentage is at 23%. You're not getting your patients to say yes and leave it at that. And now it's a very negative way. So we need to make sure we're using it correctly, and powerful things can happen. So I would love to give everyone a simple formula. Is that okay if I give you all a simple formula?
Oh, yeah.
People should write it down, and then let's go into your practices, get this information, just go in and run the reports that you need to run, and just look at a handful of things in your current practice to identify what category you really need to start focusing on to see some improvement in your practice. Now, before I give you this formula, Philip, I want you to know and everyone to know that here at Dental Intel, we really have one mission, which is to help improve patient care while improving the performance and profitability of a practice. Our number one priority, and I know it's your guys' number one priority, is to improve the health of your patients. And if we're doing that effectively, from getting them in our chairs to diagnosing properly and helping them see the value and schedule to get that restoration done, then they're going to be getting healthier. And at the same time, if that's happening, your practice is going to be getting healthier. So I hope you know, and everyone here at Dental Intel absolutely knows this, that every number, when we look at it, it is literally tied to the health of a patient. And we get that. So when we talk about numbers, it's not like we're just a number-driven organization. And I don't want dental practices to be number-driven organizations. I think we're seeing that a lot in corporate dentistry. And sometimes patient care tends to go down, or at least the personal attention to the patient care tends to go down. And that's not what we want to empower, right? We want people to understand that when we look at data, it's just telling us what we might be able to do better to get our patients healthier. So that's a key when we focus on this. But here's a fun formula. You've probably heard this from our team before and working with us. But it's pretty simple. There's 4 main categories of metrics. And I'm going to give you a formula of what it means. So there's our appointments or visits, right? The number of appointments we have coming into our practice. There is our average production per appointment. Okay, so what are we averaging on every appointment that comes in? What's our average production? And then there is our collection percentage, and then there's our overhead. Okay, so the 4 main categories are our appointments or visits, our production per appointment, not production, but production per appointment, and I'll talk about the difference between those two, and our collection methodologies and our collection percentage, and then our overhead. So here's the formula with these 4 metrics. If we take our appointments and we multiply our appointments by our average production per visit, and then we multiply that number by our collection percentage, and then we minus our overhead, that equals our profits. Pretty simple, right? I mean, it's a simple formula. It's appointments times production per appointment times collection percentage minus overhead. That's profits in a dental practice. So if we look at it in that way, it really starts to simplify what we should be focusing on in our practice. If I break this up now and I just look at these 2 metrics, our appointments and our production per appointment, if you think about that, there's only really 2 ways to increase the production in your practice. You can either see more patients, right, get more bodies in your chairs and have more appointments, or you can be more effective on those appointments and get more treatment accepted, or at least get more production per visit on those appointments. Have you ever heard doctors, Philip, in all of your history of practicing, say, I'm busier than I've ever been in my entire life, but I'm not making any more money? Have you ever heard that?
All the time, and especially more in the past 5 years, yeah.
Yeah, it happens all the time. And if I were to light up their practice with a dashboard and we were to think, for practice feeling that way right now, if we were to think Dental Intel and look at your practice, I'll tell you exactly what we're going to see. Their appointments are growing, and you'll see a solid trend line going up to where they're increasing. But what's happening is their average production per visit or per appointment is decreasing. So while they're seeing more patients and more people are coming in, they're doing less treatment on those patients, right? So that's one method of growing, but it's not a healthy way. Really what we want to do is make sure our average production per visit is either maintaining itself or growing, and our visits are growing. But if we see visits growing and our average production per visit declining, that means that we're starting to get so busy that we're not spending enough quality time with our patients to help diagnose and get accepted treatment. And it happens time and time again. We see it over and over again. We have a little over 1,000 dental practices now on Dental Intel. And over just the last 18 months, that's what's happened. We've been working with just a little over 1,000 dental practices, and over again we see that trend. They continue to add new patients and get more and more visits, but then slowly we see the value of those patients decreasing and decreasing and decreasing. And so if you think about it in that manner, there's in those two ways of increasing production. Think about just the appointments. There are so many volatile points to getting appointments. There's cancellations. There's no-shows. People that just didn't show up, that didn't cancel, but they didn't show up. There's our reappointment of our hygiene appointment. There's trying to get new patients in there. So it's constant, right? There's constant battle of different things that could affect the number of patients that are coming to your chair. And if we're not monitoring those different KPIs, we won't know why we're low on appointments. But if we start monitoring those leading indicators and one of them starts trending negatively, then we can start seeing what's causing us to have open chair time, and we can start making those changes before it becomes a detrimental effect to the financial statement. Same thing with production per visit. When you think about that, so here's how someone goes measures this in your practice. Go look at the last 6 months of your production. Just run a report and get the last 6 months of your production. And then go run a report and identify how many patients that came in. And just do the simple division. Take your production divided by that number of patients. And not patients that came in, but the appointments that you saw. And that's going to give you your average production per visit or per appointment. And that's a good number to be measuring. If it's low, so a general practice should be sitting right around $350. That would be the median where it's at. If you're below $350, there's a lot of room and things that you might want to be looking at. So, Philip, what do you think would affect that? What would affect our average production per visit? Can you start thinking of things that would have an impact on what our average production per appointment would be?
Services provided.
Yeah, the type of services, right? So let's just pause there for a second. If you think about services provided, let's say that you're diagnosing a patient and he has some pretty deep decay on 3 surfaces on the tooth. You really have a couple options there as a doctor. You could recommend an onlay, right? A 3-surface onlay. Or you could recommend something that may be more durable and probably better for them, a crown, right? Is that a fair scenario to paint? And so a doctor could either be recommending treatment based on what he thinks the patient can afford, or he could be recommending best dentistry and helping that patient understand why accepting best dentistry is important. So yes, the services you provide will have a huge impact on your average production per visit. Part of that, kind of same line, is your fee schedule, right? I don't know how often people are evaluating their fee schedules, but I don't think it's often enough. We have a fee schedule or analyzer to where we're able to tell you what percentile you are in some of your fees. And I think it's really important to make sure that we're looking at that and that we're not just average. No one wants to be an average dentist. We all want to be better than average. Could you imagine if my kids came home and they said, "Hey, Dad, guess what? I got all C's. I'm average." I'm not going to celebrate that. I'm not going to be happy about it. So we don't want to just be average, but we need to analyze that and look at where we're at in regards to our fees. Other things, obviously, that can affect the fees is PPOs. I mean, contracted insurance companies can have a detrimental impact on the average production per visit. And sometimes you may need to get into those contracts so that you can fill your ops. But once you fill them, then we need to start slowly weeding off those things and not accepting new patients in those contracted so that we don't continue to bring our average fee production per visit down. So one of the things, Philip, that you have the most control and your team has the most control to impact the average production per visit is your case or your treatment acceptance percentage. maybe it wouldn't shock you, but in looking at thousands and thousands of treatment presented, I mean thousands. I was just looking at one practice today that last month they presented $1,200,000 of treatment in the treatment planner. And out of that, they still only had 23% of that accepted. It's shocking how much treatment we present and goes untreated. And the reality is, and most of this is restorative. Sure, there's some cosmetic and elective stuff in there, but most of it's restorative. And if we think about that, when you diagnose a patient with an onlay because they have some decay or a need to get some scaling done because they have periodontitis or perio disease, or whatever you're diagnosing them with, if they don't come in and get it done, what's going to happen with them, Philip? What's going to happen to that tooth? If someone has a decay on their tooth and they don't get it fixed, and a simple filling would have fixed it, what eventually will happen if it's not resolved?
Worst things, obviously deterioration of the tooth, root canal extraction, increased health problems. So,
yeah, and let's say someone needed to get a crown. If they don't have that done, it goes to a root canal, and if they can't deal with a root canal, they have two options. They really are going to have an extraction, or maybe I guess they could do an implant or a bridge, but much more expensive treatment is going to come down and a lot of pain. And so if we think about it along those lines, and I know we all do, it's just figuring out a way as a team to make sure that we can help our patients understand the importance of fixing the problem in their mouth before it becomes a much bigger problem. And we want patients to know that you love them, right? And here at Dental Intel, we want all of our clients that work with us and use our dashboards for their patients to know that they love them. And by being able to see the data on patients that are kind of falling through the cracks, per se, where they left your office without unscheduled treatment, to be able to have a pop-up on a dashboard say, hey, Susan Lunsford was just in today. She was diagnosed with this, and she didn't get it scheduled. Here's a follow-up. To bring those things to your attention, it makes a huge difference in the practice because now they can ensure that those patients aren't going to fall through the cracks. And that's the great thing about intelligence. We just need to use that to help improve the patient care. And if you're doing that and using data in that aspect, you're going to win. You're going to thrive. Everything else will start to seem to fall in place, and you're going to do really well.
Yeah, I think it's like I relate everything to football, of course, being a guy. So it's kind of like doing the little things right on the play to play, and then you eventually look up and you've won the game.
And you're there.
Yeah, and because that you just don't win a football game on its own. You don't just you don't get new patients and break your goals and get your recure rates up and reach your financial goals just by happenstance. You have to do all these little step-by-step processes correctly. Yeah.
You got to execute, right?
Yeah.
And if you're off just by a couple degrees, if you think about football, if you're going and pursuing someone and you're just off by a couple degrees, you're going to miss. You're going to miss the block, or you're going to miss the tackle. Just by being off by a mere 2 degrees, you're literally going to miss it, right? So it's no different in dentistry. If you're literally off by 2 degrees, if you think about 2 degrees mathematically, it doesn't equate a lot when you're looking at just feet. But when you look at a football field length, for example, I'm a math junkie, Philip, okay? So I like math. I want you to know that. So when I do quick math like this, I want you to know it's because I'm a math geek, and I don't want you to think that I'm terribly smart with this stuff, because I'm not. You guys are a lot smarter than I am, but I do understand math a little bit. So sometimes I use math in some of my analogies, and people are like, how in the world did you figure that out? But it's real. I want you to know that what I give you here is real. But if you're off mathematically by a few degrees, literally, and so when I relate that to a dental practice, let's say that you're just reappointing 2% lower than you should be, right? Or getting patients diagnosed, you're 2% less than you should be. Mathematically, at 2 feet, it's less than half an inch. If you're off by 2 degrees and you travel 2 feet, you're only off by half an inch. But if you extend that out, just extend it out a little bit, at 1 mile, 2 degrees difference is 60 yards. If you keep extending that out, and let's say that you extend it out to like 1,300 miles. So let's say a dental practice practicing for 5 years, right? We'll equate that to 1,300 miles. 2 degrees, you're now off target by 28 miles. It's a huge difference just by being off a little bit. And if you have, like you're saying in football, if you have everything lined up and you're executing on it, and you're then, what did you play football? What did you do after a game? Next time you went to practice, what did you guys do? You watch film, right? You watch tapes.
Yep.
To try to identify. You're going back and you're reporting on what went well and what didn't go good so you can execute. Dashboards are the same way. It's really no different. We've got to be looking at what we did in the past, and then we got to be focusing on what we're going to do to execute on the next play. And if we can do that, you're going to be super, super successful. And it can be fun. So hopefully people don't overwhelm themselves, and hopefully you're not overwhelming yourself by using dental intel, and you're picking 1 or 2 things at a time, looking at that data, identifying together as a team, and exploring what you might be able to do to improve in that one area. And then for the next couple of weeks, you just simply monitor it. The dashboard's there. There's a saying out there. It's been quoted by several people, but it says when performance is measured, performance improves. And when performance is measured and reported back, the rate of improvement accelerates. And I've seen that time and time again. For practices that Dr. Jepson, for example, in Provo, Utah, he has started reporting back on, he has a very good and strong preventative care therapy protocol in his practice for hygiene. And he didn't establish this until April. Prior to that, they were averaging $85 a visit in hygiene for the hygiene treatment, not counting the images, but for the hygiene treatment, which prophy charge, right? Is that roughly what we're charging for prophies right now?
Yeah, pretty much about
$85. Well, after seeing that, he said, look, I'm a big believer of preventative care and preventative therapy. And so he started talking to his hygienist about it. Today, they're averaging $160. Now, that's a huge per visit, right? If you take 85 and you do 160, the difference there is $75. And that practice sees 300 appointments in hygiene a month. If you do 75 and times that by 300, that's $22,000 more in production that he's getting from his hygienist each month. And that's not seeing more patients. That's just simply getting his hygienist recommending, presenting, and getting acceptance on preventative care treatment in his practice. So when you pick just single things like that and keep it simple, a lot of great things can happen in a short amount of time.
Yeah, that's great. I think, you guys definitely have a fantastic outline for people. I know just from using it personally, if someone was wanting to look at your system, I forget how it goes. Are you guys able to do like a basic analysis and a sneak peek, and then people can sign up? Or how does it work if people are interested in your software and learning to use this as a way to coach their practice?
Well, you came to us from Scott Luna, right? That's where you heard about us as Breakaway Practice, Dr. Scott
exactly.
Luna. So Dr. Scott Luna has a program with us to where, because he's a big partner of ours and uses our services for all of his practices that he works with, they're able to get what you're talking about, which is a snapshot, meaning we get to sync anyone that goes to his events. They get a free dashboard installation. Typically, we charge $1,000 for our install because there's just a lot going into installing it and then doing our data integrity analysis. There's about 8 hours that goes into that, and so we typically will charge for that unless they're coming through one of our valued partners. But Philip, since you're a customer of ours and this is your podcast, if any of your listeners want to get a snapshot or just a view of their practice, I will go ahead and offer, if they make sure that they let us know. Now, if they call us or fill out online, if they go to www.dentalintel.com and they just fill out a form, it's going to go to one of my account managers. And when they talk to them, they're going to want to charge them that $1,000. So what they need to do is just tell them that Weston Lunsford was on a podcast with Philip Gordon, and Philip Gordon is a customer of yours, and it was said that anyone that came to us through that podcast or mentioned Philip Gordon, that I would be able to get a free snapshot. And we will go ahead and honor that as long as they're bringing your name up, to where we'll go ahead and do an installation. The installation takes 5 minutes, but then we have to do the data integrity check. And so within 24 to 48 hours, we'll go ahead and schedule a call with them to where we'll show them their data and show them what's going on in their practice. here's something I can promise that they want to take up on this offer, which is phenomenal, by the way. So we've got people every day paying $1,000 for just that single thing, for that analysis. So if they want to take us up on that offer, I can guarantee something. They will gain more information about areas of opportunity in their practice in a 15-minute phone conversation with one of our analysts on the phones with them reviewing their dashboard than they have gained over the last 5 years in any lecture. I guarantee it, because we will uncover information that was previously impossible to see. And they'll see trends of things that are happening, and we'll know exactly what the action is that's causing it. So be highly beneficial. I'm more than happy to offer that to your listeners, Philip.
I really appreciate that. I know there's a huge value there, and I think I would strongly encourage anyone listening to this to do that, and they can give your guys a call and take action with their practice and finally get things back on track. I know it was a huge eye opener for me, and I just think of it as a coaching expense, and saves me from doing hundreds of thousands of dollars with a practice coach, and I get my real-time data.
Yeah, or look at it this way. Look at it as an investment, Philip Gordon. Instead of an expense, it's basically an investment, because honestly, if you use it just to recapture even one patient a month, it absolutely pays for itself, right? So to me, I look at things like this as it's part of an investment. For my company, I probably spend about $15,000 a month just in software that we're using, software alone, that we use to be able to help us improve our performance in our company alone. And it always shocks me when I look at dentists, they don't spend a lot in technology that's out there to be able to help them improve. And what I mean by technology is automated service type technology. So huge value, and whether they want to continue on with it or not, that's up to a doctor, and we won't try to push them hard on that. I just want doctors. I honestly, Dr. Gordon, I want to protect the solo practice model. I think it's better for the industry. And the more doctors that have access to this type of information in the practices, they're going to do better in their practices. And we can prevent corporate dentistry from taking over. And I apologize if there's any corporate dentist owners sitting on this podcast. I don't have anything against you. It's just simply that we start seeing in some aspects, and I don't want to stereotype all of it, but in some aspects, we start seeing the quality of health care delivered through corporate dentistry, it starts to decline. And I would love to protect this solo market. And the more dentists that have information like this available at their fingertips, the better they're going to do. And then they're going to be less likely to sell out to corporate dentistry. And we can inspire these young graduating dentists to still believe in the quality of life that owning a solo practice can provide for them and their family.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, you've got to know the numbers, you've got to learn the business, and you got to learn how to get better. And I love that about your guys' group. You show people what's going on, and then you coach them and their teams on how to get better. And that all comes with the with just your monthly payments. And I think what you guys are doing is great. I think it's fantastic for the business. And I'm personally so glad I was able to hook up with you guys, and really grateful for this call today. So I told you I'd get you out on this time, so I'm going to let you go. I'm going to follow up with you, though. I need 3 things from you over the next couple days. I need somebody to follow up with me and get me more coaching, because I know we're doing good, but we need to do better.
Yep, I will. I just looked it up. Eric Marcus, who is honestly a genius here, is your data analyst. So I'm going to have him reach out to your office and get some things scheduled. I'll have him do that tomorrow.
Perfect.
Are you guys open tomorrow?
We are. Yep, we're seeing patients.
Oh, you are.
Yep.
Yeah,
we'll be here
tomorrow. You have 22 appointments coming in.
It's busy. Not a lot of producing, but a lot of bodies. That's what we were talking about.
You do have a lot of bodies coming in tomorrow.
Tomorrow's a diagnosis day. That's how I look at it. But I need some more training with that. I need you to try to give me 2 more connections that I can reach out for new podcast people. And
awesome.
I need you to help me figure out a way to promote getting this podcast to other general dentists to listen. So if you can help me with those three things.
We absolutely can do that. If you send us that podcast, I will get some industry leader giants to repost it and publicize it, like Bonnie Hickson with the Progressive Dentist, Gary Cady with Next Level Practice and a writer in dental economics, Dr. Lou Graham, a lecturer. I'll get it to all of our key opinion leaders that are well known out there, and I'll get them to repost and tweet it as well.
Perfect. Well, Weston, it's been a pleasure speaking with you, and I look forward to maybe getting to meeting you face-to-face at a convention coming up. So if we're in the same spot, I'm going to reach out and grab you, and maybe we'll catch a beer sometime.
Yeah, always shoot me emails. Let me know where you're going to be, because I'm usually at them all. So let me know, and we'll for sure hook up.
Appreciate it. Thanks for your time today, and we'll speak again.
Thanks, Phil. We'll see you.